Welcome to our series of interviews with candidates for the Governor of Utah. I'm Mike Mendenhall, President of the Utah League of Cities and Towns. We've prepared our questions based on a survey of our League Board of Directors. These mayors and council members have prioritized issues important to the residents in the areas they represent. We're happy to be joined today at the Utah League of Cities and Towns with candidate for governor of the great state of Utah, Aimee Winder Newton. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Why don't we start off by telling our membership a little bit about yourself and why you're running for governor.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I've been in county government for 6 years, and I've spent 25 years in local government. So before my service in elected office, I spent multiple years on the city level working to help a city incorporate, planning commission, worked for a city in economic development and communications. And so I love city government. That's where my heart is. And so I appreciate being able to be here. You know, as a candidate for governor, my priority is I want to make sure that our state doesn't become like California. And when we talk about things that impact us and our families, you know, whether it's, are my kids going to have to live in my basement because they can't afford housing, or how many hours a day am I going to have to sit in traffic because we haven't planned for traffic and transportation infrastructure? You know, those are things that are near and dear to me. And so a focus on growth, a focus on how we can better develop our workforce. I want our kids, when they graduate from high school, to be able to have some ideas of what jobs exist if they want to stay in Utah and how to get there, and being prepared for the jobs of tomorrow. And then making sure that our public education system is strong. We have a teacher shortage, and we can't have the best education when we don't have enough teachers in the field. And so those are the three priorities, as well as being able to look at the budget and really dial in on how we're going to be fiscally conservative and look at the state budget. And that's something I've been doing the last 6 years on the county level, is looking for unnecessary spending and figuring out how we can better prioritize tax dollars. So those are kind of the four things that I'm focused on in this campaign.
The League of Cities and Towns believes in state government and local government obviously playing fundamental roles in representing our constituency, the residents that live inside our cities and all over the state. You hear three pillars coming from the League of Cities and Towns this year, and you'll hear it multiple times, is respect, collaboration, and outcomes. How would you work with local governments in representing the constituents, the great citizens of Utah?
I come from local government, and so, you know, my background is in city and county government, and I know that's where the rubber meets the road. I mean, those are issues that impact people's daily life more than anything that the state does, really. And so for me, it's all about making sure that we're working together. Ultimately, I believe in pushing power and control down to the most local level possible. And so that's what, as I look at principles in my decision making, that's what it's going to be, is how do we push this down to the most local level?
How would a Newton administration work with the growth issues facing our state? For instance, the Utah League of Cities and Towns worked in collaboration with state government on SB 34 last year to focus on affordable housing in our communities, the keys that cities have, the keys that cities don't have. We took a position that the role that cities can play, we would be willing to play in affordable housing in our communities. What would that look like from a Newton administration?
Back in 1995, I was living in an unincorporated part of Salt Lake County and was getting frustrated that we kept seeing more and more apartment complexes that were being put in our neighborhoods, and we felt like we didn't really have the representation. And so I was part of a citizen-led effort to incorporate Taylorsville to become a city. And I was the public relations and advertising director. I was also the spokesperson for the effort. And to me, that was about taking back our government and making sure that we had a voice and that we could be part of the planning and zoning decisions specifically as we look at the future of our community. And so, you know, for me, this growth issue is huge. We are seeing tremendous growth throughout the Wasatch Front and in other areas of our state. And if we don't manage that properly, we're in trouble. And so there's such a balance, because we want the state to be involved in overall planning concepts and be able to coordinate and maybe bring the different metropolitan planning organizations together. But ultimately, those decisions have to be local decisions. And so what I would do, one of the things that I want to do as governor is bring back the Office of Planning. That was part of Leavitt's administration. It was called the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. It's since been changed to the Governor's Office of Management and Budget, and that planning function has basically been stripped out. I want to bring that back under the Governor's Office for a couple of reasons. Number one, I believe that when you have a governor who can ask agencies to bring all of their information and you can house it in one place, I think it gives local communities more resources. Then we have the opportunity to use planning resources to help our local governments. Maybe in some of our cities, maybe there's a city in rural Utah that needs some help with planning and needs some local assistance in different things. I want to be able to bring that. I want to be able to bring resources to our local communities, but ultimately the decisions have to be made with local governments, and I believe very strongly that those decisions need to be there. And so having a planning component is key in managing growth.
A couple of other issues that come with growth has been transportation and air quality. Our residents ask local leaders to work with state leaders to solve those tough issues. What solutions would a Newton administration propose for transportation and air quality, trying to improve those in our state?
Well, first of all, it's frustrating that our local communities don't have enough resources with B&C road funds. I mean, we all know that it is so much less expensive to maintain roads with slurries and everything else than to have to completely rebuild roads later on. And so, first of all, I think we've got to look at how do we make sure that we've got good funding for transportation. That is key for local governments, I believe. As a state leader, I would absolutely be advocating for that. I mean, that is something that I think we need to recognize is it's not just about our freeways and the state roads, which, those are important as well. But we've got to make sure that our local leaders have the resources that they need to be able to properly maintain roads. It's just fiscally responsible that way. As far as air quality goes, I think that it's great when we can look at ways that we can be innovative with air quality. Right now, we've got 42% of our air quality issues in the winter are due to vehicles. That is going to change over time as vehicles become more fuel efficient, as we have more electric vehicles on the road, and it's going to eventually transition where buildings are actually going to be a bigger percentage of our air quality issues. And so it's going to be really incumbent to be able to work with local leaders to say, are there different things that we need to have in place so that we can help, first of all, educate the public on, efficiency with furnaces or water heaters or things of that nature, whether it's homes or businesses. Ultimately, any policy, it needs to be a local decision. And those things that, that the state tries to encroach upon, I get a little bit nervous about. I mean, even anti-idling ordinances, for instance, are problematic if you have the state dictating something that a city has to implement. I mean, if the city's got to put their resources on the line to implement something, they've got to be part of that conversation. We can't just have unfunded mandates that we're pushing down to our local governments.
Tell us a little bit about what a Governor Newton would look like from a standpoint of the tax policy and the changing economics of Utah?
Well, first of all, because of the recent tax referendum and the repeal of the recent tax reform proposal, this is going to be something that I would be working on as governor next year. I am very much aware that we've got a local portion of sales tax that is critical to our communities. And you heard a lot of conversations about the sales tax on food, and people don't like that, and that was one of the reasons for the referendum. And I am one that doesn't believe that we should be increasing the sales tax on food at all. I think that's contrary to our Utah values. But I am aware, as we talk about even reducing that further, that we have that local portion. And for me, I think the state can make decisions regarding their portion of sales tax, but when it comes to that local portion, it gets tricky. And so I very much believe that we've got to keep that intact because our local communities are depending on that. So when it comes to other overall tax policy, I mean, I'm one that believes that you listen, you collaborate. I will be doing that with our city leaders. You guys know, city leaders know more than anyone else the will of their community. I mean, this is why we need to push decisions down to the local level, because you guys have the ears of your community. When you go to the grocery store, I'm sure you get people who want to talk about these different issues. you know the feel of your community and what your community needs are better than the state leader ever would. And so, you're key to helping us to know what people in the community are wanting, and then we can move forward from there.
We repeat it often here at the League, but Jefferson said that the government closest to the people
governs best.
Governs best.
Yep,
yeah.
I say that all the time. Yep.
Last one, land use policy. Local governments, you've touched on this a little bit already, but they are historically responsible for deciding, right, how their communities look, and your history in local governments, how your local constituents want your community to grow. We at the League have also used a phrase talking about when we act locally to make sure we're thinking regionally, right? That there's not walls built between our communities, but they flow into each other. So making sure that we're planning smart in that way. What would an administration under your leadership at the state level, how would land use policy from the governor's office look to as it relates to local government?
Look, to me, that's not something that the state should be touching. That is a local decision. How you zone property in your city is absolutely a local decision. When our city incorporated, I served on our planning commission for 8 years, and we were responsible for creating our master plan and looking at growth and how we wanted to develop as a city. And this was in one of Utah's most densely populated cities at the time. And so it's not lost on me that it's easy for state leaders to think, oh, well, we need more housing and we want to increase density or whatever, and try to push that down to the local level. That's not how we do it. It needs to come from local decision makers. Now, I think that there's a role for the state to be able to help educate on some of these things. When we talk about the housing affordability issue in our state, there's a lot of different things that can happen. I am not one that believes that we need to just beat the drum that we need high density housing from here on out. That's not what the communities want. Yes, there are some market factors that show that there's some medium and high density that people might want more now than maybe they did then. But ultimately, we still need just as many single family homes on the market as we've had. And with the 56,000 housing units that we're short, we've got to be able to figure out how we do that. I'm not one that's going to give in to developers licking their chops over high density and potential money to be made and then forcing that on local communities. I just don't think that's the right way to develop. And every community is so different. You have some areas where, if you're close to freeway and transit, yeah, maybe a little bit higher density makes sense there. But it doesn't make sense out in the middle of nowhere where you don't have strong infrastructure. And when cities are responsible for that infrastructure, we can't force that as a state. So, things talking about accessory dwelling units and how we can better utilize those is something that I think we can discuss. I think that there's ways that the state can help influence some of those things as far as education and giving planning tools. But ultimately, that land use decision, it should be with local governments. Can I talk about economic development for a minute?
Yeah.
So, we see a lot of great economic development happening throughout the Wasatch Front. Our rural communities are hurting in a lot of cases, and they need more jobs in their communities, and they're hungry for some help from the state. What that looks like for me, and I worked for my city as their communications and economic development marketing director for a few years. What I think when we talk about economic development for some of our rural areas, I think the state needs to be able to help provide some basic infrastructure and help push for like entrepreneurship programs and things that could help there. Along the Wasatch Front, in a lot of cases, we need to stay out of the way and be supportive of bringing in new businesses and find ways that we can do that. But ultimately, it's got to come from the ground up. It's got to be the local communities saying, this is what we need as a community. State, can you help us with this? And being able to take our lead from the local leaders. So I think with economic development, there's a big opportunity for us to work more closely as the state and as local communities when some of those opportunities arise.
Well, thanks for joining us again. Thanks for making that time here at the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And thanks to candidate Aimee Winder Newton for governor of the state of Utah. We appreciate your time. Thanks for watching our Questions for the Candidates series brought to you by the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And as you weigh your decisions this election year, remember that the government closest to the people governs best.